Mexico's most dangerous drug lords believed they could vanish underground literally. Behind steel doors and beneath layers of concrete, they built systems to outsmart law enforcement and escape justice. But in a historic crackdown, 29 cartel kingpins were ripped from their secret lairs and flown to the United States, including the infamous Narco of Narcos, wanted for the brutal torture and murder of a DEA agent. So what went wrong? How did these so-called untouchables get tracked down? Join us as we find out what happened to Mexican drug lords who tried to hide from the law in bunkers. They thought hiding in bunkers would keep them safe. They were wrong. Rafael Caro Quintero's legend began in the blood-soaked streets of 1980s Mexico. Known as the Narco of Narcos, he wasn't just another drug lord. He was royalty in the underworld hierarchy. As a founding member of the Guadalajara cartel, Quintero created the blueprint for modern Mexican drug trafficking operations, establishing the first major routes that would flood American streets with cocaine. In 1985, Quintero committed the crime that would define his legacy. When DEA agent Enrique "Kiki" Camarena got too close to exposing cartel operations, Quintero ordered his kidnapping. For 30 hours, Camarena endured brutal torture. His body was later found wrapped in plastic on a rural ranch. The murder sparked one of the largest DEA investigations in history and marked a turning point in U.S.-Mexico relations. Quintero spent decades behind bars for this crime. Then came the shocking twist. In 2013, a Mexican court overturned his 40-year sentence on a legal technicality. Before American officials could react, the 60-year-old kingpin walked free and vanished into the shadows. Freedom didn't mean retirement for Quintero. He quickly returned to what he knew best: drug trafficking. His re-emergence triggered bloody turf wars across northern Mexico's Sonora state. Bodies piled up as Quintero's gunmen battled rivals for control of smuggling corridors. The FBI placed him on their 10 most wanted list with a $20 million bounty, one of the highest ever offered. The manhunt ended in July 2022. Mexican Marines tracked Quintero to a brush-covered area near San Simon in Sinaloa. He was captured hiding among bushes with a loyal guard dog that refused to leave his side. Authorities found him exhausted, his clothes torn, sprinting through thorny scrubland. But Quintero wasn't the only royalty dethroned. The recent mass extradition included Vicente Carrillo Fuentes, former leader of the Juarez cartel and brother of the legendary Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the Lord of the Skies. Amado earned his nickname by pioneering the use of private aircraft to transport massive cocaine shipments. When he died during a botched plastic surgery in 1997, Vicente took control, continuing his brother's bloody legacy along the El Paso border. Among the extradited were also the notorious Trevino Morales brothers, Miguel, nicknamed Z40, and Omar, known as Z42. These former leaders of Los Zetas began as elite military deserters hired as enforcers before breaking away to form their cartel. Los Zetas rewrote the rules of cartel violence with military precision and theatrical brutality. The brothers continued directing operations from behind bars, running the successor Northeast cartel through an intricate network of corrupt officials. These cartel leaders shared a common trait. They believed their power made them untouchable. They built hidden bunkers, maintained armies of gunmen, and corrupted officials at every level. Their organizations functioned like shadow governments, collecting taxes, enforcing laws, and even providing social services in neglected communities. Their extradition to American soil marks the end of an era. These aging kingpins now face the American justice system with its harsher sentences and restricted privileges. For Quintero, who could face the death penalty, it's a final chapter that brings his story full circle, potentially dying for the same crime that made him infamous nearly 4 decades ago. The fall of these cartel titans has created a dangerous power vacuum. Younger, more volatile leaders now fight for control, often with less discipline and more indiscriminate violence than their predecessors. The narco royalty may have fallen, but the bloody kingdom they built continues to thrive in new hands, from cartel kings to terrorist enemies. But what makes this designation deadly? The underground world of Mexican cartels changed forever on January 20th, 2025. With a stroke of his pen, President Trump signed an executive order declaring these criminal organizations a national security threat beyond traditional organized crime. It wasn't just words on paper, it was a declaration of war that changed everything overnight. By February 19th, 8 Latin American criminal groups appeared on the Federal Register as foreign terrorist organizations. Among them were Mexico's most powerful cartels, the Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco New Generation cartel. This classification puts them in the same legal category as ISIS and Al-Qaeda. The implications are massive. Under United States law, providing material support to designated terrorist organizations carries penalties of up to 20 years in prison. This casts a much wider net over cartel operations. Anyone paying protection money, transporting goods, or even family members sending money could potentially face terrorism charges. The case of Maria del Rosario Navarro Sanchez demonstrates this new reality. The 39-year-old Mexican national became the first person charged under these new designations. According to the unsealed indictment, she supplied grenades to the CJNG and helped smuggle migrants, firearms, money, and drugs. Federal authorities proudly displayed their evidence, including a golden AR-15 nicknamed El Dorado, found in her possession during her arrest in Mexico. These terrorist designations give United States intelligence agencies expanded surveillance powers. Drones now regularly fly over suspected cartel territory in Mexico. These aren't commercial drones, they're military-grade surveillance platforms that can track movement, intercept communications, and pinpoint the locations of hidden bunkers and labs. The cartels have responded by going deeper underground, literally. Sophisticated bunkers have become essential cartel infrastructure. These aren't simple hiding spots. Modern cartel bunkers feature reinforced concrete walls, advanced ventilation systems, emergency escape tunnels, and communication equipment that can withstand government raids. In Sinaloa State, authorities discovered a bunker complex beneath an unassuming farmhouse. The entrance was hidden under a water trough that moved aside at the press of a button. Inside, they found living quarters, weapons stockpiles, and a command center with multiple computer systems and satellite phones. The complex even included a medical bay for treating wounded cartel members away from public hospitals where they might be reported. The CJNG has built similar fortifications in Jalisco State. Their bunkers often connect to tunnel systems that allow for quick escapes across large distances. One discovered tunnel stretched nearly a mile, emerging in a safe house several neighborhoods away from its entrance. These bunkers serve multiple purposes beyond hiding leaders. They function as secure meeting locations, storage for drugs and cash, holding cells for kidnapping victims, and emergency fallback positions during government operations. Some even double as fentanyl production laboratories, keeping the deadly manufacturing process hidden from both authorities and rival organizations. But the terrorist designation has made these bunkers less secure. United States intelligence technology can detect unusual heat signatures, track suspicious supply movements, and monitor communications that reveal bunker locations. Information sharing between American and Mexican authorities has improved dramatically under the threat of Trump's tariffs, leading to more precise raids. This new legal framework has created unprecedented pressure on cartel operations. As traditional hiding places become vulnerable to enhanced surveillance, and as the legal consequences grow more severe, Mexico's criminal organizations face an existential threat unlike anything in their history. With terrorist labels and exposed bunkers, how did Mexico respond to Trump's ultimatum? The clock was ticking for Mexico. With Trump's 25% tariff deadline approaching fast, President Claudia Sheinbaum faced an economic nightmare. The solution came in a dramatic pre-dawn operation that stunned the world. In a single day, Mexico rounded up 29 imprisoned drug lords from facilities across the country and loaded them onto planes bound for 8 different United States cities. This wasn't standard procedure. Typically, Mexico extradites prisoners individually after lengthy legal processes. Mass extraditions are extremely rare, and 29 at once was unprecedented. Former DEA Operations Chief Mike Vigil called it historic, a clear sign of Mexico's desperation to avoid economic punishment. The operation required military precision. High-security prisoners were extracted from different prisons simultaneously to prevent allies from organizing resistance. They were transported under heavy guard to military airfields where United States aircraft waited. The logistics were complicated by the need to distribute prisoners to different jurisdictions based on their outstanding United States charges. This mass extradition represented a dramatic shift in Mexican policy. Under former President López Obrador, cooperation with United States law enforcement had deteriorated significantly. AMLO had restricted DEA operations in Mexico after United States authorities arrested former Defense Minister Salvador Cienfuegos Cepeda in Los Angeles on drug trafficking charges in 2022. Though the United States eventually returned Cienfuegos to Mexico, the incident severely damaged bilateral trust. Sheinbaum inherited this strained relationship along with Mexico's cartel problem. She initially planned to continue AMLO's hugs not bullets approach, which focused on addressing poverty and social factors rather than confrontation with cartels. But Trump's tariff threat forced her hand. A 25% tax on Mexican exports would devastate an economy where 80% of exports go to the United States. The extraditions came during a crucial window. A high-level Mexican delegation, including Foreign Affairs Secretary Juan Ramón de la Fuente, was in Washington meeting with United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The timing was deliberate, a show of good faith during negotiations aimed at preventing economic disaster. Behind the scenes, frantic diplomatic efforts were underway. Mexican officials proposed a series of coordinated actions to tackle drug trafficking, particularly fentanyl production. The United States wanted visible, immediate results, and the mass extradition delivered exactly that. For Mexico, the risk went beyond economics. The country's prison system holds a precarious balance of power, with incarcerated cartel leaders often maintaining control of their organizations from behind bars. The Trevino Morales brothers, for example, had been running the Northeast cartel from their cells. Removing 29 major figures simultaneously created dangerous power vacuums that could trigger violence. The extraditions also revealed the complex reality of Mexico's justice system. Many of these prisoners had been in Mexican custody for years, with United States extradition requests pending. Rafael Caro Quintero's extradition request had been stuck at Mexico's foreign ministry since his 2022 recapture. The sudden processing of these long-delayed transfers highlighted how political considerations, rather than legal procedures, often determine outcomes. For the families of cartel victims, the extraditions brought mixed emotions. The transfer of Caro Quintero was especially significant for DEA personnel who had waited decades to see him face American justice for Agent Camarena's murder. Acting DEA Administrator Derek Maltz called it an extremely personal moment for the entire agency. The gambit appears to have worked, at least temporarily. Trump announced a 30-day suspension of the threatened tariffs, giving both countries time to develop a more comprehensive security plan. But the reprieve came with conditions. Mexico agreed to deploy additional troops to its borders and intensify operations against fentanyl production. 29 criminals were traded for billions in trade. Who won this showdown? The early morning phone call between Trump and Sheinbaum on that critical Friday marked the climax of weeks of tense negotiations. On one side, a newly inaugurated Mexican president facing potential economic catastrophe. On the other hand, a returning United States president is determined to deliver on campaign promises about border security and the fentanyl crisis. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Trump didn't wait. Within days of returning to the office, he threatened sweeping tariffs, demanding Mexico act or face economic pain. Within days of returning to the White House in January 2025, he threatened to impose sweeping tariffs on all Mexican imports, a $400 billion trading relationship. His demands were specific: crack down on drug cartels, halt migration flows, and stop fentanyl production. The message was clear: deliver results or pay an economic price. For Sheinbaum, the timing couldn't have been worse. Just months into her presidency, she inherited a security crisis with violence at record levels. Mexico had recorded over 30,000 homicides in 2024 alone. The cartels controlled vast territories, and her predecessor's hugs not bullets strategy had failed to reduce bloodshed. Now she faced external pressure that threatened to derail Mexico's economy. The diplomatic drama played out across multiple fronts. In Washington, a Mexican delegation led by Foreign Affairs Secretary Juan Ramón de la Fuente met with United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Meanwhile, security officials from both countries engaged in marathon sessions to hammer out concrete actions that could satisfy Trump's demands. Sheinbaum's strategy was calculated. While publicly denouncing any invasion of Mexican sovereignty, she simultaneously signaled willingness to collaborate. This delicate balancing act aimed to satisfy both domestic audiences, who opposed foreign intervention, and the United States' demands for immediate action against cartels and migration. Behind closed doors, negotiations centered on specific metrics. The United States wanted verifiable reductions in border crossings, increased seizures of fentanyl, and decisive action against cartel leadership. Mexico pushed back on the timeline, arguing that sustainable results required longer-term strategies rather than quick fixes. The breakthrough came when Sheinbaum offered to deploy an additional 10,000 troops to the Mexico-United States border. This concrete step bought precious time, with Trump issuing a last-minute suspension of tariffs until March 4th. The 30-day reprieve set the stage for the extraordinary mass extradition that followed. But Sheinbaum proved to be a shrewd negotiator herself. In exchange for Mexican cooperation, she secured important concessions from the Trump administration. Most notably, the United States agreed to address the southbound flow of high-powered weapons from America into Mexico, a long-standing Mexican complaint that previous United States administrations had largely ignored. The weapons issue is critical. Mexican authorities estimate that over 70% of firearms recovered at crime scenes in Mexico come from the United States. These aren't just handguns, but military-grade assault rifles and heavy weapons that give cartels their firepower. By getting Trump to acknowledge this problem, Sheinbaum scored an important diplomatic point with her domestic audience. The negotiations also established a joint task force on fentanyl that included health officials from both countries, broadening the approach beyond purely security measures. This allowed Sheinbaum to maintain some continuity with her predecessor's public health approach while still taking the enforcement actions Trump demanded. Media coverage in both countries reflected the competing narratives. United States outlets emphasized Mexico's concessions on extraditions and border security. Mexican publications highlighted Sheinbaum's success in avoiding tariffs and securing weapons trafficking commitments from the United States. The reality is more nuanced. The 30-day reprieve represents a temporary truce rather than a permanent solution. Both presidents can claim short-term victories, but the fundamental issues remain. Mexico's cartel problem won't be solved by extraditing 29 criminals, regardless of their prominence. And the economic threat of tariffs continues to hang over bilateral relations. For Sheinbaum, the challenge is converting this momentary success into a sustainable security strategy that satisfies both domestic constituencies and international partners. For Trump, the question is whether these Mexican concessions will be enough to show progress on campaign promises about border security and the fentanyl crisis. Presidents negotiate temporary peace, but are the cartels already one step ahead? The capture of Mexico's most notorious drug lords marks just the latest phase in a criminal evolution spanning decades. Mexican cartels have transformed from simple drug smuggling operations into sophisticated paramilitary organizations with the firepower to challenge governments. This evolution reflects their remarkable adaptability in the face of changing threats. In the 1980s, Mexican cartels operated primarily as middlemen for Colombian cocaine. When United States authorities shut down Caribbean smuggling routes used by the Medellin and Cali cartels, Mexican organizations seized the opportunity. Groups like the Guadalajara cartel, led by figures including Rafael Caro Quintero, graduated from couriers to wholesalers. By 2007, they controlled approximately 90% of cocaine entering the United States. The business model evolved alongside their products. While cocaine remained profitable, cartels diversified into methamphetamine production, marijuana cultivation, and, most recently, fentanyl manufacturing. This synthetic opioid requires minimal space to produce, generates enormous profits, and needs no agricultural base, making it the perfect drug for organizations under pressure. Their territorial control strategies have evolved as well. Early cartels operated with implicit government protection during the 70-year rule of Mexico's Institutional Revolutionary Party, PRI. When multi-party democracy arrived in 2000, Cartels lost their political patrons and began directly challenging the state through violence and corruption. President Felipe Calderón's 2006 decision to deploy the military against cartels triggered an arms race. Criminal organizations recruited former military personnel and invested in military-grade weapons. Los Zetas, formed by deserters from Mexico's special forces, pioneered this approach, combining military tactics with extreme brutality. Other cartels were forced to militarize in response. The organizational structure of cartels has also evolved. After authorities adopted the kingpin strategy of targeting leaders, cartels adapted by fragmenting into smaller, semi-autonomous cells. When Vicente Carrillo Fuentes was arrested in 2014, the once powerful Juarez cartel splintered into competing factions. Similar fragmentation occurred with the Beltran Leyva organization after its leaders were captured. This splintering had deadly consequences. Smaller groups fought viciously over territory, driving Mexico's homicide rate to record levels. New cartels like Jalisco New Generation emerged from these fragments, often more violent than their predecessors. Mexico recorded more than 460,000 homicides since 2006, with cartel violence responsible for roughly half. Technology has revolutionized cartel operations. They now employ encrypted communications, drones for surveillance, social media for intimidation, and sophisticated money laundering through cryptocurrency. The Sinaloa cartel uses drones to monitor law enforcement movements and drop explosives on rivals. Meanwhile, CJG maintains a sophisticated online presence, posting professionally produced videos of its armed convoys. Their territorial control has evolved from simply controlling drug routes to establishing parallel states. In regions like Michoacán, Tamaulipas, and Sinaloa, cartels collect taxes, administer justice, provide employment, and even deliver social services. This governance role makes them resilient against pure security approaches. Community responses have evolved in parallel. The rise of civilian self-defense groups called autodefensas reflects the government's failure to protect citizens. In states like Michoacán and Guerrero, farmers and business owners formed militias to fight cartels. These groups achieved some success, but faced their challenges with corruption and human rights abuses. The latest evolution involves international expansion. Mexican cartels now operate in at least 50 countries across the Americas, Europe, Africa, and Asia. The Sinaloa cartel has representatives in Australia handling distribution, while CJNG has established operations throughout Europe. This globalization protects them from disruption in any single market. Government strategies have evolved less successfully. From Calderón's military approach to López Obrador's hugs not bullets policy, no strategy has significantly reduced cartel power. The recent extraditions under Sheinbaum represent an attempt to build on previous approaches while satisfying United States pressure. The future battlefield is increasingly digital and chemical. Cartels are investing in cyber capabilities to protect communications and financial networks. They're also refining production of synthetic drugs like fentanyl, which require fewer people and less visible infrastructure than traditional drugs. This constant evolution presents a profound challenge to governments. As cartels adapt faster than law enforcement strategies, the question becomes whether traditional enforcement approaches can ever succeed against organizations that function more like evolving businesses than static criminal groups. For Mexico's most feared drug lords, hiding underground wasn't protection. It was the beginning of the end. Thanks for watching. While you are still here, click on the link on your screen to check out another of our videos. See you there.